Well, two blondes were talking, and the one blonde says to the other, "Don't tell anyone, but I am really afraid of bees." And the other one says, "Don't worry, that's totally okay. I'm afraid of the whole alphabet." So today we want to talk about truthfulness, being true with each other. We are sharing in the 9th commandment of the 10 commandments, "Thou shalt not bear false witness against the truth." So if you're afraid of bees, that's okay. What would happen if every fear you had came true instantaneously? I'm always asked, do all thoughts create? No, thank goodness. It's those dominant thoughts that we hold with feeling and repeat them over and over so they become anchored in us. What would happen if every fear you had came true instantaneously? Would you choose to think and speak differently if you really recognize the power of the words that you're speaking? What if everything you thought or said about others came true for you instead? Would you think more kindly of others and treat them better than you would otherwise? Why is it so important for us to be aware of our thoughts and our words that give creative power to our lives? Well, the answer is just that, because we create our world with our thoughts, with our feelings, and with our words. And so this commandment that we bear truth to our lives, that we live from the divine essence of the Christ within us, as Peter said in the meditation, that we surrender to that fullness in us, that divine essence in us, and let it lead our lives, is vitally important. And as the commandment says, that we don't bear false witness against the truth of who we are. Every great cathedral, every new invention, every decision ever made began with just one thought. Did you think about that? Just somebody had an idea for the cathedral in Barcelona. What is it? The Gaudi? Is it the Gaudi? La Casa Grande de Familia. La Sagrada. Yes, sí. Muchas gracias. There was an idea in the mind of God, and that idea was so expansive, it's continued through many, 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 many years. But every great cathedral, every new invention, every decision ever made began with just one thought. So what you think about and what you focus on is what you will materialize and manifest in your lives. We know that. We teach that here every week. So that your thoughts and your words need to be clearly directed to the end result that you want to see in your life. And if you're bearing false witness about your life, you're creating those experiences, those less than beautiful experiences in your life. We are coming close to the close of our series on Prosperity's 10 Commandments with number 9. We have one more next week. It's Prosperity's 10 Commandments from the book by Georgiana Tree West of the same title. And we're learning that these commandments are not ancient rules, but they are living states of consciousness that when we learn to embrace them, help us have lives that thrive. It's not something that was way back then for that time for a bunch of roaming nomads in the desert to keep them in order. And yes, that was the practical aspect of the commandments at that time. But anything that comes directly from Spirit, from God, is an eternal, ever-expanding truth. And we're looking at the expanding truth in each of these commandments. So number 9, "Thou shalt not bear false witness against your neighbor." It has to do with the essential nature of truthfulness. Where are you truthful in your life? Where are you true to the self of who you are? To bear false witness is to be untruthful with any intent to deceive. So where do you deceive yourself? Where do you not own your truth as fully as you could, so that you're bearing false witness in your life? Every time we say, "I'm poor, I'm broke, I'm sick," we bear false witness against God because quite simply, we are definitely stating that there is an absence of the presence of God in our lives. If God is only good, if God is only an expression of good in our lives, and we say, I'm poor, I'm sick, I'm broke, and we say this so many ways. I was going to make a little list this week of everything that people said to me where I had to say, don't say that, because they were speaking in opposition to the truth of who they are. My sister-in-law says, I can't make a decision. I don't make decisions. I'm not good. I'm not good at making decisions. Or we say, I'm getting older. I just can't, I'm not as flexible as I used to be. Can't bend down and tie my shoes. Don't say that. In the truth of the eternalness of God, is there not the possibility you could bend over and tie your shoes? How much are you limiting yourself? How much are you limiting yourself? It's just not a priority for you, maybe, but it's not the truth of God that you don't have total life, health, and flexibility in you. Oh, my muscle tone is fading. Let's see, what was it? I'm on a limited income. I'm on a fixed income now. All the good ones are taken. What's some of the other ones? Somebody said, just it comes up all the time in what we think is casual conversation. But it's not, it's creative conversation. And we're bearing false witness against the divine essence of our being. Mrs. West says, also the person who takes pride in never telling a deliberate lie, who cleverly manages to convey false impressions by stretching the truth. Someone who takes pride in virtues they don't have, those people who brag and exaggerate, are also conveying false impressions. She even says listening to gossip and being receptive to false things and possibly perpetuating them bears false witness. Affirming someone is unsuccessful or involved in disaster of any kind bears false witness against God's truth in that situation. Oh, did you hear that divorce? It's so terrible. It doesn't bring forth or call forth the love that's possible in the situation, the healing that's possible in the situation. You're talking to the opposite of what God is in the experience. And when we accept lack of any good thing, we're yielding to the evidence of our senses. We're yielding to appearances. We're yielding to the facts and the figures and the diagnosis and all the evidence that's out here in the external, and we're denying God's ever-present love and good and power. We're failing to stand in the truth of who we are and what's true for us and what's true for every one of us, you see. You shall not bear false witness. Mrs. West says, in terms of your prosperity, you shall not bear false witness against the source of your wealth. You shall not bear false witness against your good, against God as your source. Every time you say, I don't have something, or it's not enough, or I am not enough, you're bearing false, you're not speaking the truth that we teach here every week. And we're all pretty good at knowing that, but it's those casual conversations, I think, for us, that this commandment applies to today, because I think we could nod our heads, yes, we can all see ways where we casually speak something about us, where we jokingly speak something about ourselves. I'm always late. Oh, I'm just always late. Or, oh, I can't give that away, because I keep things too longer than I should. We just say those kinds of things in our lives, and an awareness is to capture ourselves when we say them and say, oops. Now, a lot of people in the old days used to say, cancel, cancel. How many of you remember that? That was kind of popular. Cancel, cancel. And I heard once something that rebuffed that, and I can't remember what it was, but it made sense at the time. So I've never said cancel, cancel anymore, but I've just said, that's not the truth of who I am. The truth is I keep things in order. The truth is I am on time. The truth is I do care about showing up on time. The truth is, and state the truth for yourself in opposition to just what you've just said. When you speak a word of truth, it's 10 times more powerful than the negative you've just spoken. So it will absolve it. It will dissolve it. But if you don't follow up that casual conversation of limitation with a powerful demonstration of truth about who you are, then you're at the random decisions of the universe. And you're pulling that into your life. And none of us want that. You are the master creator of your own life. You can choose to use your own energy for great or uninspired results. Right? Great. Oh, my life is wonderful. Or you choose. You choose. If there's something you like to have work better in your life right now, your career, your relationships, your prosperity, your health, your self-esteem, you can choose right now to respond differently to life, differently than how you've been responding. You can choose right now today, before you walk out of the room, you can choose to say, that's not the truth of who I am. I'm not going to state that about myself any longer. I'm going to pay attention to my thoughts and feelings and words as I describe the events of my life. You know, a lot of times, when I can only speak for myself, when I preach sermons and I give this great, ideas or teachings or principles, and then we shake hands through the line and everybody comes through the line and says the exact opposite of what, it's just, oh, that was so great, Cherie, because, I'm not that way. And I'm like, oh my God. Sit back down. You know that joke? You know that joke about the new minister that gets up, the board's really excited, and the minister gets up and gives a great sermon, and then the next week she comes in again and she gives the exact same sermon. And the board goes, what? Well, okay, and then third week she comes in, she gives the exact same sermon. The board thinks, we better say something or figure out what's going on. And so they pull her aside and they say, it's a great message, but 3 times, it's like Netflix where we can watch it over and over again, And they said, why are you doing that? And she says, well, as soon as you get it and start demonstrating it, we'll move on. Oh, yeah. Dana Gatlin, who is the author of God is the Answer, was sharing how she was speaking the prayer of faith one day. Do you know the prayer of faith, Myrtle Fillmore's prayer of faith? God is my help in every need. God does my every hunger feed. God walks beside me, guides my way through every moment of every day. I now am wise, I now am true, patient, kind, and loving too. All things I am, can do and be through Christ the truth that lives in me. And she said she was speaking that over and over, and she came to the line, I now am true. And she said that she just stopped. It caught her attention because she thought, true to what? I now am true. True to what? What was she supposed to be true to? What kind of obligation was she putting on herself in prayer? I now am true. What was the responsibility that she was assuming? In the 4 agreements, there's an agreement to be impeccable with your word. And she says, I now am true. I now am true. And it came to her suddenly. She said, I love this, in a vivid blaze of revelation. Haven't you had that when you've been praying sometime, or you're driving in your car and you have a vivid blaze of revelation? She said that her only responsibility was to be true to God, the living essence of the Christ of her being. Isn't that our assignment? Isn't that our only responsibility? She said that if she faithfully fulfilled her part in any circumstance, if she was true to God, then God would surely take care of everything else. Do you believe it? Do you live as if you believe that? Or do you waver? She said God would take care of everything else. Everything. No matter what terrible conditions she might be experiencing, any sickness, any pain, any inharmony, any loss, any depression, any poverty, any failure, any lack. It came clearly to her that those negative experiences were merely opportunities to prove the truth. I now am true. I now am true. I now am wise. I now am true. Patient, kind, and loving too. All things I am, the great I am, can do and be through Christ, the truth that lives in me. And when I'm true to that truth that lives in me, then everything else takes care of itself. I have to remind myself of that from time to time. Do you? I have to remind myself of that. She said these are false ideas that have to be routed out simply by bearing witness to the truth. All the negative things that happen in your life are just not true in the mind of God. And then she went on to say really powerful words. When I doubt God, I am not being true. When I doubt God as the supreme one and only power, I am not being true. Nothing can stand against God. God simply is. And in the midst of God's wide and varied creation, Spirit is divinely unaware of small personal angles and tangles and jangles. Don't you love that? God isn't aware of any of that. It doesn't exist in the mind of God. Anything that's not the truth of God is a lie. And in the gospel of, it's either John or Peter, he said it's the devil or adversarial power is the father of all lies. Anything that doesn't stand in the truth of God. She goes on to say, Spirit is aware only of the glory and perfection of creation and beholds it operating smoothly, easily, and perfectly. Spirit takes no account of any disorder, discord, or confusion. There is absolutely no possibility in God of the slightest inharmony, the least weakness, the faintest disturbance, or doubt, or anything that in any way deviates from what is eternally glorious, good, full, and free. Can you feel that? God is only what is eternally good and glorious and full and free. There's nothing in the mind of God. The only place that stuff exists is in our sense realm, the human self of us. And the human self of us is a real part of us. We are spirit, mind, and body, but we are body. And we have these parts of us that take hold of these ideas that are lower consciousness and not the higher consciousness and truth of God. When we begin to suspect that there may be something in the world that can stand against the power of God, we're not being true. And when we doubt that anything in our experience cannot be overcome by rising up into the consciousness of the Christ, we are not being true. We're being, I'm going to say weak, or, we're just timid. God exists in you, in me, and in everything that may ever happen in us, around us, to us, or through us. And it is omnipresent good. The Spirit of God is omnipresent, everywhere present good. It's not anything that's bad or menacing or disturbing, frightening, ugly, weak, painful, or imperfect. You are a perfect child of God. You're not an almost perfect child of God. And when you claim that truth for yourself, everything in your physiology, everything in your system begins to move and shift and adjust to come into accord with that, to come into agreement with that. And you may not feel it at first. Remember when Myrtle spoke words of life to her body? 2 years in the closet, she said, don't be discouraged if your body is slow to wake up and respond, because you've been using that casual creative conversation on yourself for years. I'm always late. I can't make a decision. That's just how I am. I can't wake up in the morning. I'm not a morning person. I'm painfully shy. And we've been saying those casual kinds of things about ourselves for years. So you begin to take hold of the truth of who you are and turn that around. Stop prioritizing your weaknesses and begin to prioritize your truth. So how do we do that? Are there some practical steps? How do we learn to be true to God? How do we trust that God will bring that perfection in the face of evidence of appearances and facts and figures and diagnosis and all that human realm? How do we lift up above that? How can we say these bad things don't exist when they constitute the very realities of our life? And we can agree, the first thing we can do is to agree that they came from our own false, distorted thought, that our distorted thought has caused the negativity to come. We accept certain things as facts that we should declare vehemently as untrue. And these negative conditions, as I said, only exist in our sense realm, in the human self of us. And the only place that they exist, are alive in us, is in those false beliefs. They're not true in the realm of God in which we move and live and have our being. So we have to find the courage to let them go. We have to have a willingness to let them go. Because some of our imperfections serve us, don't they? I can't make a decision. And so then somebody else makes the decision for you. And then you can abdicate your responsibility, and that works real well for you, maybe. I don't know. I'm always late. And all the good ones are taken. Well, then you won't have to really find somebody that you could step up and do relationship with, because out of 7 billion people on the planet, they're not all married or in committed relationships, Jesus said, if your eye is single, your whole body will be full of light. And then I looked up Charles Fillmore to see what he would say about this idea. And in Atom Smashing, sounds southern, Atom Smashing. In Atom Smashing Power of Mind, he says, Jesus acknowledged himself to be the Son of God, living in the superconsciousness, that high realm of spirit, calls for nothing less on our part than a definite recognition of ourselves as sons and daughters of God, right here, right now, regardless of appearances to the contrary. He said the method by which Jesus evolved from sense consciousness to God consciousness was to recognize his spiritual selfhood and make constant affirmation of its supremacy and power. So it's one thing to say, I am the Christ of God. The Christ of God is in me. But to make constant affirmation of its supremacy and power in your life. That's not the truth of me. I do make good decisions. Not all the good ones are taken. I'm loving, and there are loving people all over in my life. You see? He says, Jesus loved to make the highest statements. I and the Father are one. All authority has been given unto me in heaven and earth. And Mr. Fillmore goes on to say, by the power of his word, what he was talking about in his conversations, he penetrated deeper into the omnipresence of God, and he tapped the deepest resources of his mind, where he released the light and the life and the substance and the love and the joy and the wisdom of spirit, which enabled him to get the realization that wholly united his consciousness with the divine. And he told us to do the same, instructed his followers to do the same. Instead of bearing false witness against God, we're supposed to keep our thoughts focused on God's presence, holding only to that which is true. And this is not, I always think people say unity's so Pollyanna. Really try to hold what's true to your life, the truth of who you are all day, one whole day. It's not for the faint of heart. It's for mindful people, conscious people, awake people. We have to stay awake to do this. We live in the super consciousness. We are to live. This is what Mr. Fillmore said Jesus did. This is what we're supposed to do. We want to do. We are to live in the super consciousness that calls for nothing less on our part than definite recognition of ourselves as sons and daughters of God right now, regardless of any appearance that's going on in your life to the contrary. We are to recognize our spiritual selfhood, the Christ of our being, and make constant affirmation of its supremacy and power in all things in your life. All things conform to the perfection of the Christ. Romans, all things work together for good. Let's put our hands on our hearts. Think about your life. All things work together for good. Together, all things work together for good. All things work together for good in my life right now. Together, all things work together for good in my life right now. Yes. So as we close, just a few reminders that we face the condition. We don't run away from things. We face the condition in the positive knowledge that it's not true, and it has no place and no truth in the truth of who we are or in our circumstances. We vigorously deny every negative appearance as a false fact. That's not the truth of who I am. I like hand things. not the truth of who I am. And no matter how real the appearance may seem, we bear witness to the truth of God as life, love, whatever it is, health, peace, prosperity, truth, patience, whatever it is that's circling in your life that needs more harmony, more love, more peace, more life, more health. You bear witness to that. You acknowledge God as the source of all good and declare the truth of God's presence and power and supremacy in all circumstances in your life. You proceed to keep your thoughts centered on God's omnipresence and God's goodwill, knowing that whatever we hold in mind must inevitably find its way into form in our life, into real experience in our life. Thoughts held in mind what? Produce after their kind. And so knowing all of that, keeping the mind focused on the truth, keep the heart singing all the while, we declare God's goodwill is now done in our lives, and that's bearing witness to the truth. Thou shalt not bear false witness against God, against the Christ self of you. So we start, as we do here every Sunday, by acknowledging the one presence, power, and love, ever ready to pour itself in every way possible into our lives so that we're blessed with abundant good. So let's just take a moment and seal that in prayer. Just feel the truth of who you are. You are the Christ of God. I am the Christ of God. Let's say it. I am the Christ of God. And that self is beautiful beyond belief. That self is loved beyond belief. That self is love. That self is life, perfect life, perfect health. That self is perfect peace and harmony. That self is perfect joy and companionship, perfect relationships and friendships, perfect marriages, perfect unions. I am the Christ of God. Again, I am the Christ of God. This is the truth of who I am. Together, this is the truth of who I am. And so it is. Amen.